Okay, and I'm going to hand it over to Gary, who's going to show us step 12. Do the right things. Thanks, Heath.
Hi everybody, my name's Gary, I'm an addict.
Hi Gary.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I didn't expect to feel like this right now. I feel really, it's really nice to see people I haven't seen in a long, long time, you know, kind of old friends of mine really, and get a warm welcome when I arrived here, you know, and I believe that, you know, my resounding memory of my first meeting of NA was that I was made to feel welcome. You know, I got clean in September 13th, 1993, it's my clean date, and I got clean in Blackpool, and there was one NA meeting a week in Blackpool on a Thursday night, Devonshire Road Hospital. There was one woman in that meeting who had managed to get over a year clean. She was the local guru. She was our old-timer. Then the next meeting other than that was on a Tuesday night in Lancaster, which was about 20 miles up the road, run by a bunch of old-timers from Alcoholics Anonymous. And then there was a meeting a day in Manchester, which was about 40 miles away, and I was on sickness benefit, so I wasn't getting to any of them. So, you know, there wasn't a lot of experience around when I got clean, and they used to throw us all in a van because I was in a treatment facility. They'd put us all in this van and take us to meetings. So they used to take us to these meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Alcoholics Anonymous in Blackpool back then was like, they have a thing in Blackpool called Scottish Week, where they all kind of come flooding down from Scotland to the Vegas of the north and get on the RAS for a week, and a lot of them never make it back and they end up in the AA meetings. So then me and a couple of my peers started showing up in these AA meetings. I got clean just for my 24th birthday, you know, and I was a drug addict. And I was a blackout drinker too, but they used to read this pamphlet called Problems Other Than Alcohol, an excerpt from it, and glare at me and my friends while they were reading it. So, you know, and I'm a failed rebel, so if you tell me not to say something, it just really makes me want to say it then, you know. So I would deliberately reference drugs to upset these old macho Scottish men and get frog marched out of meetings. And in the end I just thought, sod this, I'm going to put my energies into Narcotics Anonymous. And, you know, I got very involved in Narcotics Anonymous and started a lot of meetings, 12-stepped a lot of people, took NA into the prisons up there. And, you know, and it stood me in good stead for the rest of my recovery, you know. I mean, when I first, you know, I'm from near Blackburn originally, and, you know, when my heroin addiction took off, you know, there was no heroin in Blackburn, so we used to have to drive to Manchester and go on these missions. It's 25-mile drive, you know, so you end up driving in a stolen car or a flipping car with no insurance, you know, like petrol gauges at the bottom, it's like £4 in, it'll get us to Moss Side and back, and, you know, so it was, I was prepared to do that to use, and so I was prepared to sort of travel and do whatever to stay clean. And I got very involved in it, and I came to London, and I was, you know, like, and then, but I've become very disillusioned with NA, I've got to be honest, you know, and I rarely come to NA meetings in London anymore. I still go to NA meetings in Blackburn, and I'll tell you what happened was, I was very involved in H&I, I did a lot of prison service and a lot of detoxes, and one of my favourite commitments I used to do, just round the corner here, City Roads it's called, and it was a frontline detox, and I used to go in there, and I had that commitment numerous times, and back in 2016 my commitment was up, so I went to the H&I committee just round the corner from here to be re-elected, as I thought. Anyway, I get in there, and the guy who's taking the H&I committee, he knows me, he knows who I am, he knows what I do, he knows, and he's like, so before we vote on this, do you have an NA sponsor? And I was like, I don't know what you mean. What does that even mean? You know, Dudley S, who's co-founder of NA in this country, goes to other 12-step fellowships. So how do you define that? Can you show me in the book where it tells me what one of those is? So he was flummoxed then. So he's like, so do you work NA steps? And it's like, I don't know what that means either. I got clean before the step working guide existed. I got clean at a time when, you know, like, I used to have to go to the public phone box because I didn't have a landline at my house. Nobody had a mobile phone. To ring, sometimes I'd ring the helpline in London just to talk to another addict. And there'd be junkies outside the phone box waiting to use the phone to score while I'm trying to talk to another addict, you know, and it's like, and I kind of took issue with it. And as luck would have it, like a week or so after that, I got invited to speak. I'd been invited to speak at the European Convention of NA in Birmingham. So I got on the podium, and I was 22 years clean at the time, and I was having I was in the thick of an acrimonious divorce. My mum had just been sectioned again. Paul Gills had recently died. There was a lot of stuff going on, do you know what I mean? And it wasn't a good time in my life at that point. And I got on the podium and I just fucking, you know, because I'm a bitextual. I know this book and I know the AA book as well, do you know what I mean? So I just, from NA literature, just kind of made a bit of a mockery of this NA sponsor, NA steps, do you use the green and gold and all this? Because I hate all that stuff. As I say, I'm a failed rebel. I'm not good with rules. Never was, do you know what I mean? And one of the things I love about this fellowship, or these 12-step fellowships, is it's anarchic. It's all back to front. It's like, it works from the bottom up rather than the top down, you know. The most insane person in the meeting is the most important person in the meeting, and it's, you know, well, sometimes the most insane, but you know, like the most damaged, you know, someone's just coming off the street, it's like, you're the most important person. It's beautiful. And so and after I did the talk, I thought it was great, the talk, and it got a great reception, but a few of the kind of NA secret police who had information that I kind of attend other 12-step fellowships went on a bit of a mission to get the talk taken off the internet, which is everything I'm not about. And so it went to the convention committee, they listened to it, unanimously said it was a good NA talk, and then so that got kicked into the long grass. So then the next thing, they took it onto social media. There was no social media when I got clean, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm going to the Trafalgar Square meeting and people are coming up to me going, have you seen all this stuff on Facebook about you? And I'm going, I don't want to see it, I'm not interested, you know. And in the end, they took it to Region and my talk was taken down. And I just thought, yeah, you know, this ever-loving, wonderful, welcoming fellowship. Yeah, you know, like, you didn't like a few things that I said, so you better say, okay. And I ended up going to Region and sort of confronting them, challenging them about it. Not long after that, I got invited to Russia to speak at an NA workshop. I was sponsored by a guy in the US at the time, and he was involved in writing the first edition of the basic text in the late 70s. But he's an old-timer in AA nowadays. But because of his history with the basic text, they wanted him to do this workshop. So he rang me up and said, do you want to come to Moscow with me to do this workshop? Because you're fluent in the NA literature. You know, and like, it's a long time ago when we put that basic text in. So yeah, of course, I'll come and do it. And of course, they've got these lunatics over there as well. You know, it's like they heard he was from AA, so they're boycotting it. So there's like, there was this boycott went on in fucking Moscow. So it's like, they're everywhere. So, and then, you know, I went through my divorce, and after my divorce, I sort of started spending more time in the north. I ended up in a new relationship in the north, so I wasn't in London as much. And when I come back to London, I just thought, you know what? There's a lot of people in NA who I'd just be quite happy never see again. Which may sound sad, but I just, you know, I know the mechanisms. I can go away and write about the resentment and find my point in it and pray and this, that and the other, and go and make amends. But it's like, most of these people have got a lot of time around. And it's like, I'm just quite happy not to see them ever again. And there's an NA meeting in Earl's Court. I was there last night, spoke there last night actually, and the men's meeting, and I love that meeting. Because there's men in that room who, you know, they're grown-ups. They've had kids, they've had divorces, they've had jobs, they've lost jobs, bankruptcies. And there's a wealth of experience in that room, you know. And so I like going there. It's sensible. So now I don't have an home group. I don't have an home fellowship. I don't know where I belong, do you know what I mean? So when I got asked to do this, I was really, you know, I'm pleased to be here. Because I do love NA. Mm-hmm. And But I've got to tell you what happened, right? So this is interesting. So what happens is, I get asked to speak at a meeting in St Helens. Now, St Helens is probably 70 miles from where I live, you know. So it's a drive, do you know what I mean? And it's like, but I agreed to do it. And it's like, I'll drive over to St Helens. Then I got asked to speak at an NA history event about the history of NA in the Northwest, which I was quite flattered about. I thought, well, they rarely ask me to speak at anything anymore, so, you know, because I'm not a green and golder or whatever, so yeah, okay, I'll do it. Anyway, it went to area and somehow my invitation was rescinded. So I was kind of like a bit hurt about it. So I've rung this fella in St Helens. I thought, they expect me to drive to St Helens on my money, on my petrol, you know, all the way over there. Like, you know, they've just uninvited me speaking. Do they realise how much effort I put into setting meetings up here? It's all that, do you know what I mean? And so I ring the guy up saying, can't do your meeting, mate. You get someone local, sack it off, you know. Anyway, rang him back the day after, just didn't sit right with me. Sorry about that yesterday. I was having a moment. I'm going to come to St Helens on Monday. That's what I do. So I drive to St Helens, but I drive via Manchester. And there's a mate of mine in Manchester called Power, Fatneck he's called. Fatneck's just got sober, right, in a detox, clean and sober, and I can say that, can't I? Because that's something else. When I got clean, it said clean and sober in that basic text, so don't anyone tell me I can't say that, do you know what I mean? Because I'm all right with that. If it upsets you, talk to your sponsor. But this Fatneck's just got out of detox, so and Fatneck's from like a notorious family in North Manchester. So I go and pick Fatneck up, and he was an old mate of mine, and we're driving from Manchester to Warrington, and all I did all the way down the motorway was bitch and whine about NA. And the thing is, Fatneck's just got out of detox. He doesn't know where he's coming and going, and I'm giving him all this about NA traditions and what's green and gold, and he's not. He doesn't even know where he is. Do you know what I mean? It's like, anyway, I get to this meeting, and I come to share, and I do the share. And there's a guy sat opposite me, like where Charlie is now, but it's a bigger meeting than this. And as I'm sharing, he's narrowing his eyes at me, and I'm thinking, who's this? Is he one of them? Is he one of the Facebook mafia that tried to sort of get me cancelled in NA? So, and so like I'm doing my share, and I'm feeling a little, because the thing is, I need to feel safe. Yeah. It's so important. I never felt safe my whole life. Growing up, I found it so brutal. I found it so unsafe, so much violence, and you know, like, and so much, you know, I just need to feel safe. And so the meeting, they go off for the break, and they come back in. A couple of people share. Then the guy who's narrowing his eyes opens up and shares back to me. And he says his name. He's got Scouser. He goes, "It's you, innit?" I'm going, "It's you, Birmingham, 2016, the one that was up on the podium doing that talk." And anyway, what happened at Birmingham, that I didn't tell you, was the night before I did my share, they had the banquet. You know these NA banquets they have? Banquet, yeah, whatever. But somebody's nicked the banquet, a book of banquet tickets, and has been flogging them around the convention half price in true NA style, do you know what I mean? So it comes to the banquet. It comes to the banquet, there's about 400 addicts wanting a meal, there's about 150 meals in there, so there's people who've paid, who are kicking off Royal because they're not getting the food, people who are on stolen tickets who are kind of like loading up trying to get a second helping, do you know what I mean? The waiters are getting abused, the waitresses are getting shouted at, it's just madness. And so when I come to close my share at this European convention that caused all the controversy, at the end of my share, I said, if you're an old-timer and you've been coming around a while, please keep coming back. If you're new here and you're most welcome, please keep coming back. I said, and if you were at that banquet last night having a dinner on a stolen ticket, you're especially welcome. Keep coming back, right? So the guy who's been narrowing his eyes, he says, it's you, innit? He went, Birmingham 2016. He said, at the end of your share, you said, if you had a dinner on a stolen ticket, you're especially welcome. He said, well, guess what? He said, I was 6 days into my detox, sat there rattling my bollocks off. He said, I stole the book of tickets. He said, and you said that. He said, and it blew my mind. He said, and I've not used since. He said, I'm 6 years clean. He said, I've got a boot full of NA literature out there. When I go to meetings in Liverpool, I give the literature out for nothing. And it was like, fuck. Like, I've had 6 years of being pissed off about this. And people who say, oh, clean time don't count. Try getting some, because what happens when you get some is you see how things play out. So, back to the Russians. So what happens with the Russians is, Christmas this year, I get this WhatsApp message from Ivan, and I thought from some mad number, and I thought this has got to be one of them scams, you know, you ring them back and your bank account empties or something, do you know what I mean? So I'm thinking, what's this about? So I blanked it. My sponsor died New Year's Day morning. Life can be cruel. Nature's cruel. Nature is cruel. The lambs eat the lambs. My sponsor, I got a sponsor up north in the end. He's 33 years sober, philanthropist, Irish, working class, self-made, multi-millionaire. Got cancer of the esophagus last August on New Year's Day morning. Boom. So I ain't got a sponsor right now. So I can't say, have you got an NA sponsor? I ain't got any sponsor. Do you know what I mean? I'm sponsorless. I'm looking, but I ain't got one right now. And so I've been at my sponsor's funeral, and I come out of the funeral, and the phone rings from this mad number, and I'm thinking, bollocks, I'll answer it. So I answer it, and it's some guy called Ivan, and he's got really bad English, but somehow gets it across to me that he wants a call with me in 2 days with a translator. He's Russian. He said, and so we do this call with this translator, and he's telling me how much he loves me, and that at 9 years clean he was suicidal, and someone gave him a disc of the talk that I gave in Russia that got boycotted by the lunatics, and asked me if I would start doing a workshop with him and his friends in Russia. So this year, every Monday at 5 o'clock, I've been doing a Zoom meeting with about 30 Russians, doing a step a week with them from the basic text. It's amazing how it plays out. You know, but the thing is, it's like, I've had a lot, you know, like 23 years clean, I was doing 90 meetings in 90 days in the thick of my divorce. You know, my business partner, he said, I just had an outburst in my office, I'm going to give a call. I've thrown a pair of trainers across the office.
Fine.
Yeah. I've thrown a pair of trainers across the office in a fit of rage. He pulled me to the side. He said, I don't know what you're doing for your recovery, but it's probably not enough, because that's not okay what you just did. And I listened to him. I was in detox with him, you know, and he said, it's really simple, Gary. You either trust everything's going to be okay, or you don't. And if you don't, you're going to drive yourself mad in the thick of this divorce. And it sounds great that day. Well, I just trust everything's going to be okay then. But what I had to do, I went to 1990, and after about 40 meetings, I started to, like, the terror started to subside a bit, the financial terror I was having. It's like, maybe this will be okay. And I wrote a list of fears when I was in the thick of my divorce. And my head was that peppered, I forgot about it. And I was getting 2 years on from my divorce, I was getting some step 4 sheets for a sponsee, and I have a box where I keep all my 12 step stuff. And I found this list of fears, and it was like, you know, my son's going to be on the park playing football with his stepdad while I'm sat in a flat on my own with no money, kind of with a tap dripping and blah blah. And none of it had come true. In fact, you know, the divorce settlement that I didn't think I was going to be able to afford to pay, my income had doubled. You know, and I you know, it was like, it was all right, but 25 years clean, I hit a really, really tough patch, and it felt like a breakdown. I admitted myself into treatment for 2 weeks. I left after 11 days. It was like, enough. And it weren't like treatment when I did it in 93. It was like a flipping holiday camp, you know, it really was. And but I just needed a couple of weeks out because my nervous system was burning itself out. And I learned a lot around that time. It felt like a breakdown, and it proved to be a breakthrough. And I realised, I think, the best way I can describe it was, I was traumatised, from, the first 23 years of my life, before drugs, the relief I got from drugs and all the madness that happened in the using, and I've spent all the years since trying to untangle that and heal that, and and I've got some outside help. I went to a trauma therapist, and she's brilliant. I'm seeing her tomorrow morning. I realised, things like boundaries. I had no boundaries whatsoever. I just associated them with like passive aggressive women from Al-Anon or whatever. Do you know what I mean? We had a counsellor in treatment. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. And the ex-wife, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. I said, no, I don't want that. I really don't find that attractive. But the therapist I work with has got brilliant boundaries. I don't know what fellowship she's in. She'd never tell me things like that. But she's in a fellowship. And it made it really attractive. And I realised, I wasted such a lot of my life, such a lot of energy on worrying about what other people think and other people's opinions. I don't get invited to speak at NA functions now. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I get so overly concerned with other people's validation and approval. At 25 years clean, I was going to meetings. If you want to get self-esteem, you need to do esteemable things. I had no self-esteem. But it was a lot better than what I came in here, which was a pile of self-hatred. I didn't love myself by any means, but I didn't hate myself either. But at 25 years clean, the shit hit the fan. It really did. And I was cursing God. I was driving around the North Circular in my car one day, screaming at the top of my voice, why is this happening to me now? I did everything I was asked. I spoke at conventions. I held hands with people I don't like. I hugged people who smell. I did all this shit. And where have you gone? And a couple of years later, a year later, we were in lockdown. Finish on this. We're in lockdown, and I was on a Zoom meeting, and there's a friend of mine, and not a friend of mine, actually, a guy I knew in the fellowship from London, who in my very early days, when I first came down here, I used to go for coffee and people would be taking the piss out of my accents and all that sort of stuff. He was actually quite kind to me one night, and I've never forgotten it. A very different take on recovery to me. And he was in this Zoom meeting, and he was broken, 30 years clean, and him and his wife had broke up. And he'd been in the treatment centre that I'd been in. And he would, after I came off the meeting, because in the meeting I said, it's really nice to see you, he called me up and told me how much he was struggling. And it was all the stuff I was experiencing at 25 years. But the worst thing about experiencing that at 25 years was it was all the shame that came with it. Because people are going, oh, maybe you should do another 4-step. It's like, oh, please, honestly, do you know how many 4 steps I've written? And he, and I was about to pick my son up one Thursday night, and he rang me and said, I'm suicidal. And I said, can you hold on till tomorrow? I said, I'm just about to pick my son up. I said, I'm going to be on the M1 driving up north tomorrow. I'll be in the car for 5 hours. You've got me for as long as you want. And the next day we spoke, and I was on the phone to him for about an hour and a half, and I came off the phone and I almost laughed out loud. Not at his pain, but at the thing of when I was saying when I was in that place, why? Because that experience I was able to help him at 30 years clean, because he was experiencing all that same shame. And and an old sponsor of mine said it to me, I was about 15 years clean, and he went, he said, a lot of people between 25 and 30 years clean kill themselves. You do know that, don't you? And I was like, yeah, sure, won't happen to me, But when I hit that place at 25 years, his words were like coming back to me, because I know there's nothing in using. I know that using drugs, it's like, forget that. But when it comes down to it, you've got a sponsor of mine come round, and when I was in my divorce, I don't know how you're coping with this. I went, what else am I going to do? Kill myself, or keep going. And I'm going to keep going. I need to be in amongst this. So I'm really glad to be here. I've done my time. It's really nice to see you, Roz. It's really nice to see everybody else. Thanks for the warm welcome. I really appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you, Gary. Just